go. Here we are. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Behind the Couch. I'm Dr. Shiloh, all by my lonesome because Dr. Scott is on an airplane right now. So I wanted to come on and just do a little tiny bit of housekeeping. Lenora, feel free to hang out. Feel free to grab a spot if you can and let me know how it's going. We're going to have a great episode show for you guys today. So Shannon, yes. What's the next episode of LA Not So Confidential? I am working on that right now. I think I want to get back to kind of a weird delusion disorder, something kind of funky that, is kind of rare and that not all of us have heard of. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm also working on, I really want to do a follow-up to police pursuits because I've had a big change of heart. So that might be a bonus episode. Might be something that we just do here, but I really want to do that and just have that interaction with you guys. So I want to hear your thoughts. So since our last one, I feel like I need to reel in the fangirling about police pursuits, especially as I've got to know or hear about more stories from victims, innocent victims of some terrible, terrible accidents that have happened. So yeah, that's what we're cooking up. I have this whole next week off, so I'll be doing a bunch of research. Scott's just coming back from his week off, so I feel like we're getting some good resets. Hopefully we'll have some good energy for you guys. And then we're moving into holidays. Like, we're just going to try and have a lot of fun stuff, especially for beloved Patreon members. We are cooking up our holiday party right now and trying to figure out what other fun stuff we can bring your way. And I hope everyone who's a Patreon member can join our virtual holiday party, because last year it was, with COVID, it was just nice to sit around and kind of chat and get to know each other. And, if you just want to kind of lurk in the background and not say much, that's totally okay. We won't think you're creepy at all. We have some very fun voices that are able to carry the conversation. So with that, I thought I would read our new Patreon members. I know we were kind of toggling back and forth between doing that here and doing that on the regular episode, but I have 4 beautiful souls to welcome to the Patreon tribe. We have Alicia T. We have Holly D. Holly, getting in that Christmas spirit. Abby, our own Abby, thank you so much for joining. I always wonder, isn't she already a Patreon member? Because you're just like family already. So thanks for making it official, girl. And then we have Kelsey M, who just joined today. So thank you guys so much. It means a lot to us. Lenora, if that's you saying, hi, did this work? Yes, I see you in the chat. Why don't you hover over, grab the spot button and see if that works for you, if you can grab it. Sometimes it's a little finicky. We've been using Get Vocal, going on 2 years now, guys? So we know it can be a little weird, but just let me know how it's going and then we can see you. You're coming on. I see it. Yes, we made it.
Fabulous.
How you doing?
I'm just happy to see you and be here. I'm sorry.
It's totally fine.
Please go back into your zone.
No. I was kind of coming out of my zone, but I'm glad this is working. So look, you guys, obviously I'm having a special guest tonight to help me co-host with Scott being in travel mode right now. But I'm going to leave the spots open. So if people want to jump on with questions, if you just want to put them in the chat for Lenora, if anyone else, and I don't think so right now, I was trying to look to see if there was anyone else from her consulting group, which she's going to talk about later, but they're welcome to jump on as well. So if I see them pop into the room, I'll give them a little nudge if they would like to contribute. So Are you all moved into your new place?
No, I'm still the old one. No, it's again, grateful to have a home, grateful to
I
have a
hear ya.
job, but the supply chain situation has made everything. So even just something as simple as getting the padding under the wood is just a nightmare. So
Oh my goodness. I was just like, how much is she doing right now with the holidays coming up and moving? And, thank you. I'm grateful to have you to take an hour to spend with us.
literally anything for you. So I'm just happy to be here.
Well, it's so good to see you. I was so happy that we got to see each other a few weeks ago. Really, you really realize how infrequently you see people in person these days, or just in the last couple years. But it's so nice to always reconnect. So I just want to give a little background to everyone here. I first met Lenora when I was actually sitting having coffee with a mutual friend of ours, Nako, and we were talking about how we had this very progressive district attorney elected in the city of Los Angeles. And, this was post George Floyd. And I said, there's so much decisiveness right now, and divisiveness. I'm sorry. I hear from law enforcement. I hear from people who are perpetrating crime and are being prosecuted for crime, but I don't really hear a lot of victims' voices in any of this. And I would love to know what their thoughts are on all of this. And he was like, you have to talk to my friend Lenora, and told me about some wonderful things you were doing. And I thought, yes, absolutely. And so I'm so happy that, he is like you both are people that kind of know everybody in every world, and have so many connections. It's kind of funny to think of, once you and I met, how many people we did know in common.
Right. Yeah.
In these very weird, like, different circles. So I did. She and I met up and have kind of been on the same path, the same radar for a while, and are now getting to work together a little bit. So with that, for my folks here who have not heard your story before, and I know that you've told your story a gazillion times, but I think a little background would be super helpful as we talk about what you're doing and moving forward and how you're really trying to change things in this world. So if you can give us a little bit about your experience with what's leading you to all of this.
Yeah, happy to do that. And before, I just want to just jump back a little bit. So that the period of time which we met, it was just such a strange, contentious time because, you have so much going on, just so much. And, I got to the point where I literally at that moment had written an op-ed, because it's a really strange place to exist when you identify as someone who's progressive. You want to see change. You want to see, the removal of systems that aren't working, of racist policy. But at the same time, I'm a multi-violent crime survivor. I work with other violent crime survivors. And I just kept seeing that everybody was so polarized. It was fight. It was lock everybody up or let everybody out. And I was like, okay, where is the nuance? Like, why, just from my personal view is like, maybe, let the cannabis people out, put the rapists and murderers in, why is this so difficult?
Right.
And so, I wrote an op-ed about it at that time. And it was also weird for me too, because we got this new DA and he created a crime victims advisory board. We're one of 3 throughout the country. The most progressive DAs have them. So it started with Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, San Francisco, and LA. So number 3. And even that, like, something to me, which is awesome, which is having crime survivors and everybody on the board. We're very diverse. We don't all have the same political views. We do not have the same stories. Some of us are gang interventionists. Like, I'm put there for gender-based violence because I'm a survivor of, even though everybody, which I'll get into my story, everybody knows me from stalking, but I'm also a sexual assault and DV survivor at different times in my life, different people. So a lot of times people are always like, oh, the stalking girl. And I'm like, well, I care about a lot of other issues. It's just,
thanks for that nickname.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, well, like when Vice calls you the Aaron Brockovich of stalking, that's like a lot to live up to. But, it's like that story was my public story because the nature of people who had involved and all the media that it got. So, it was the kind of thing where sort of psychologically I started realizing that stalking, and again, I'll get into my story, is kind of where sexual assault was in the 70s, right? Where there was real lack of understanding. And I started realizing the reason why is most people who are stalked, well, first of all, just to give people some stats, is that it's, they say 7.5 million Americans, according to the CDC, which we all know is totally, that's just what's reported. So it's way higher than that. It's a silent epidemic. And then if we're just sort of understanding the statistics, I'm more like in the 3% anomaly phase, where my stalker is someone I didn't know. Most of the time it's intimate partner, DV overlap kind of a situation. So I'm this weird anomaly. And the reason why I bring this up before getting into my story is I started realizing that besides the fact that I'm already media trained, I worked in entertainment my entire adult life, right? So we have that in my person. But then most people who are stalked, the last thing they want is more attention. They don't want, that's like, so that's why these stories, whenever you hear stalking stuff in the news, for the most part, it's, a celebrity or whatever. And people think they think that's the crime. No, that's not the case of the crime at all. And so I just started realizing, like, wow, okay, I need to be twice as loud for everybody who can't for that crime. So I always like to preface it whenever I speak first by sort of giving that little bit of context, just, understanding stalking. And also, as I get into my story, my dad was a psychiatrist, and even though my stalker, and it was great talking to this audience because I know everybody's like way more informed, but when I talk to just like any audience, I always want to say I have, nothing but empathy and understand people who have, different mental health struggles. And I am in no way saying that people who are schizoaffective are all dangerous. I'm not saying that. I'm only saying my stalker is very dangerous. Yes. So I always like to just, before we get into it, oh yeah, I see. Yeah. Oh yeah, right. How the word stalker is used so flippantly. Let me tell you, I just wrote a real nasty letter to Dolls Kill. I bought something from them, even though they're a little problematic, but I'll admit it, I did. And
what are they? Are they like a clothing company?
A cool girls clothing store, like fun, alt stuff, whatever. And so I bought a pair of like goth cowboy boots. And at the end, their social media says "stalk us at," and I'm like, so tacky, you guys. Okay, so getting back into my story. So we'll roll it back to 2011. I'm this LA girl, Nako could tell you, was having a good time, having art galleries. Everything was pretty great in my life. And unknown to me, there is a schizoaffective man named Justin Massler, who's legally had his name changed to Cloud Star Chaser.
Okay.
So that's who I'm referring to, who back in 2011 had started stalking Ivanka Trump out in New York. And I don't know this. Why would I? I'm living my life out in LA. And he even tries to kill himself in one of her stores, right? So there's a lot going on over there. Again, I don't know any of this. So he jumps bail. He comes to LA. And again, I'm living this real fun 2011 version of my life, right? And so I was one of LA Weekly's People of the Year. It was this great photo of me. I'm friends with the capuchin monkey. I'm holding the monkey. It was like, Naka's with the monkey. So
very for everyone around the country who's watching.
Yeah, having a great life. So the man who then, eventually to stalk me, he jumps bail. He comes to LA. He comes from a very wealthy family. I'd also like to include that he is also an incel. So that is important to understand when understanding both him and the crime. So he comes to LA, he opens up the LA Weekly, he sees me, he becomes fixated. He comes to my gallery wearing like a spacesuit. And I'm used to eccentric people. I talk to literally anyone. So I talk to him. And at first, he seems intelligent, quirky. But then I start to realize, no, this is not quirky. He looks right at me and he goes, "Oh, you look like Jessica Rabbit." I'm like, "Oh, I get that sometimes." And he's like, he looks right at me. I'll never forget it. I can just feel the split happen. He looks right at me and he goes, "And I'm going to stalk you."
Oh,
it's like, excuse me? And it felt really unnerving.
Oh.
I kicked him out of the gallery. He went willingly. I kicked him out. And I was like, oh, creepy. I told some of my friends about it. Didn't think much of it until a couple days later. I'm sure y'all remember back in 2011, the days of like Perez Hilton and all those tacky blogs. So I start seeing the story about a man who's Ivanka's stalker and how the Trumps had hired, again, 2011 Trumps had hired bounty hunters to extradite him to serve trial back in New York. And I'm like, that's the guy who said he was going to stalk me. Holy shit, this is the same guy. So he goes to Rikers where he starts to serve some time for stalking her. And that's when he starts to write me letters. And the letters, they start off as these really just like, it was clearly like manic, schizophrenic, just rambus nonsense, right? And so at first I was like, okay, creepy, but he's in jail. And then as soon as he got out of jail, because New York has really trash stalking laws. California, most of the laws in every state are just trash. But at least California, we were the first to ever have these stalking laws. Sort of history. There was the murder of Rebecca Schaeffer, who was this beautiful actress. You know, she was reading, I believe it was the script for The Godfather 3. She was under consideration for the Julia Roberts role in Pretty Woman when her stalker, because back then the studios didn't even notify her that she was being stalked. She literally had no idea.
Right.
You know, he comes to her front door trying to get her autograph. He kills her on the front lawn. You know, huge story. And that was the first time, even though obviously stalking had been around before 1989, that was the first time it really shook the public. And so Rhonda Saunders was one of my mentors. She was the ADA at the time, and she was very instrumental in getting the first stalking laws passed in California. So even as a law, they didn't get passed until California in 1992. So, you know, we have a lot of these conversations about things like spousal rape and like how late they are to actually do laws. So that's why I just sort of give the context for stalking, because it is a really nuanced crime. And another thing I want to explain about stalking before I get back to my story is that one really unique thing about stalking is that whereas with most crimes, you know, the trauma, the event happens, right? With stalking, it's this ongoing series of events, right? So think about that as far as like PTSD and how we deal with it. And it's you know, it's like if there's a robbery, there's a robbery, you know, it's not just like ongoing. Right?
And also the reason that law enforcement doesn't take it so seriously, because it could be a series of smaller events, yet traumatizing.
Right. And then we talk about that a lot, where it's like, you know, something as simple as, you know, roses left on your front door. Some people are like, oh, that's romantic. Other people are like, yeah, but you don't remember the conversation that said, if there's a red rose on your door, that means you're dead. You know what I mean? It's like, you don't know. So, right. So, okay. So back with my story goes all over the place, and I'm actually like, there's a lot's happened in a decade. So, okay. So he's in Rikers Island. He's sending me these letters. At first they're just unsettling, and then they start to really quickly escalate to very graphic rape, death, and kidnap threats. I mean, really horrific stuff. So I go to LAPD, and they were so dismissive, borderline insulting. They tell me, dye my hair, get off the internet, you know, all that sort of, what the hell?
Incredible. So, basically, don't call any attention to yourself, lady.
Totally. Just make yourself smaller, go away. Right. And I'm like, at this point, you know, so sorry, I already been, I should backtrack as soon as we're done. So I actually closed my gallery after this because I was so spooked, because I didn't want him coming. If you know where I am every day, that was terrifying. So I actually imagine like, this is the first of several times I had to like give up a career or lost a job. Right. So I closed my gallery, and as luck would have it, I got into casting for reality TV, which I've done for the last 10 years. So at this point, I'm brand new at my casting job. I'm now working in TV and stuff. And the death threats start to escalate. Like, they're just getting worse. They're getting more graphic. They're getting more upsetting. They're coming more frequently. Rhonda, yeah, you know Rhonda. Rhonda's amazing. Rhonda's everything. So I'm getting all these like threats. I've gone to LAPD. They're not helping me. And now I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to learn how to track IP, because at least I know, because he comes from a wealthy family. He bounced around. At least I can know like how much level of risk I'm under if I know what state he's in.
Sure.
Okay. So that's kind of how it is. And then my boss gets death threats from my stalker. Now I'm like, so everybody at my work, you know, they're Googling my stalker, who's been in the news quite a bit. They're seeing, oh, he tried to kill himself in Ivanka's store, workplace violence. We're in a casting office with people coming in and out all day. Everyone's terrified. So what ended up happening, and I love that boss, we're still friends, but when you work in entertainment, you're freelance. So he just didn't renew.
Got it.
So I lose my job, and I'm like, this is bullshit. So I'm at this point, I'm like, I don't want to say normalizing, but I'm just like, oh, another kidnap, another rape, you know. And it's also, I have to sort of explain that he goes through these sort of holes of where he's in love with me, and I'm this like being with magical powers, and then on the other end, I am the head of a Zionist conspiracy, and he's got to kill me with Zyklon B, which was used to kill my relatives in the Holocaust, by gassing me through my door. It's just all this stuff, right? So conversationally, it goes from loving and hating me, and you know, also he also has erotomania, which I don't know if your listeners are aware of, but right, it's a false relationship that doesn't really exist. So sometimes I'm his wife, sometimes, you know, all that.
Right, so, part of a delusion.
Correct.
That there's a relationship there.
Exactly. So all this stuff is like going on, and so I'm just like, fuck this. So I go on a show. It's actually how I met Rhonda for the first time. The first time I went really public, because she's such an expert, and we just vibed right away. And I was like, you're amazing. So I started realizing that there's a lot of things with how we handle this crime that are really messed up. Even so, at this point, everyone's like, oh, you'll get a restraining order, but he doesn't have a fixed address. You won't be able to serve him. So I'm just like, okay, so if he can send me a death threat, right? Why can't I send a restraining order via email? There's legal precedent for things like foreclosure notices, right? So I'm like, how come we can't? So I started like working on all this stuff, which also led me to, it's so funny, back in 2015, Congressman Adam Schiff was just my local congressman. He was just like the local guy.
Yeah.
So I actually started working with him at that point. I started coming up with proposals, a restraining order registry, all kinds of stuff, which got taken to Department of Justice back in 2015. So it's this weird thing where like literally nobody's helping me. I'm getting death threats left and right, but the sort of like advocacy and activism was already brewing within me. I'm just like, well, this is all bullshit. I know Rhonda, I know Schiff, like, let's do so. So I'm kind of like,
yeah, let's get some policy going.
Exactly. So I start kind of like doing all of that, right? Even though nobody's helping me. And I am, at this point, I'm not married. I'm not with my husband. I'm living in a shitty studio apartment. Anybody could gas me through my door. Like the level of fear was ever present. It was awful. So I still have insomnia issues. I still have a lot of, when you're stalked or you go through a lot of these things, there's a lot of like physical repercussions that people never really talk about, but that are part of it. So, okay. So timeline wise, I'm working with Schiff, I'm working with Rhonda, nobody's helping me. I get an opportunity to do 48 Hours wants to do my story. So which eventually turned into a 2-hour episode. And so the reason why I bring this up, because this is actually part of why I went to start my company later, which is we're going to get into. So while I will always be grateful for the platform that 48 Hours gave me, and the subject, 17 million viewers is nothing to sneeze at. That's a very large audience. The thing with these shows, they're well-intentioned producers, right? Nobody's trying to make, but it's and the way I explain it is, it's sort of like, if you're not a crime survivor yourself and you don't come with this amount of knowledge, the choices that you make are choices that are good from a producer standpoint, right? So like they'll do things on a lot of these shows where, they're trying to get that sound bite from you, but they don't realize that they're manipulating you, coercing you, trying to get that moment. They don't realize that one of the things that they've done to me is that with the B-roll, they're asking me to recreate my trauma, and it's like, so I've talked to other survivors who are like, oh, I just straight up disassociated. Like if I said to you,
oh my gosh,
think of your most traumatic moment, whatever that is in your brain. Now think about reenacting it for entertainment purposes on a show. That's
can you go back to that and just act it out? And
right. And can you do it with some tears? I mean, that's the other thing they say to me too, because I'm a confident person, and they really want that forced vulnerability, which I'm not comfortable with because that's not where I am with my journey. So when I did, the reason why I bring it up is when I did 48 Hours, they're coming. So I should take it back a little bit. I had gone public with my story, but not anything that big, like smaller shows and smaller, mostly like feminist blogs and stuff. And so people started attacking me going, oh, look at you. You just want attention. And I'm like, I've been on TV since I was 5. Like this isn't. So there was a lot of that happening, which was another whole discussion. Like, why don't we believe women? But so what 48 Hours decided to do without my consent, because they're coming from a producerial standpoint, which is let's interview him. Oh, this is a great idea. So yes, the footage is terrifying. And I will say that as soon as America saw this, everybody believed me. Everybody's like, holy shit, this girl's going to die. This is real. But why does it take your stalker looking into camera screaming about how they're going to murder you for people to believe you? But that's what happens. So,
which is what he said, knowing he was being recorded for television.
Totally what he said. I mean, I can play the video now, like just horrifying, that's so scary. So 48 Hours did not, I may have given them permission. I just was never asked. They just went and they did it. Right. And so then they were like, oh shit, they knew what they had. And so they realized what an elevated risk, because I don't, you can't just do that to people. Right. Because again, these shows are used to doing homicides. They're not used to doing these active investigation. I always say they're used to working where, the people are no longer living. They don't know how to deal with living survivors.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So, So that happened, which actually was how I met the wonderful Dr. Chris Mahandi, because they had put me at so much risk that they're like, oh shit. Then he looked at the footage, and obviously he's the expert. I mean, he interviewed 1,000 stalkers. He's the best. So that ended up triggering them to get my stalker for the first time arrested in Utah, where he'd been stalking another woman. He got put into a facility, and also this is just timeline wise 2016. So He gets put into a facility. A week later, Trump wins.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I was personally devastated. I'm walking around
Mm-hmm.
like, what is happening? And I'll never forget it because I'm picking, this story is important. I'm walking my dog, I'm scooping up her dog shit, and I get a phone call, Secret Service. And I thought it was somebody pranking me.
Sure.
Right. I was such an asshole to them. I was just like, who the fuck is this? Who, like, and I was like, naming them, and they're like, no, it's Secret Service with LAPD. Your stalker Justin Master is broken out of the facility in Utah. Normally the states don't work together, but now because Ivanka is the first daughter, and I'm going, holy shit, I have won the stalking lottery. I'm the one person to benefit from this Trump presidency. Okay.
Well, hey, yeah.
Here we go. So they're like, he's escaped. We don't know where he is. And I'm thinking, he knows I put him there. Like, oh my God. So I'm in this whole, Ivanka is useless. So I'm beyond useless. I just saw that before my eyes. So now I'm going, oh my God, he knows I put him in there. He's going to come kill me. And then I think, wait a second. Ivanka is now first daughter. He's actually going to go for her. And that's what happened. Mm-hmm. I learned because, again, I turned on, what happens when there's restraining orders is all public knowledge. So my name was on, whatever. So long story short, TMZ puts my picture. I had no idea. I turn on the TV. My face is on TMZ. Very jarring. And in relation to all of this, I'm like, that's crazy. So they then pick him up because he went to New York to stalk Ivanka, where he wasn't even allowed to be. Sure. So I'm thinking, okay, he's stalking the president's daughter. He's going to get some time. No, New York has such trash laws. Like in 2014, New York declared in their state court that a death threat over electronic device, so like a death threat over email or text, is considered freedom of speech. It's not even a crime. So long story short, he gets out, right, very quickly. And he comes to LA with the intention of killing, kidnapping, and raping me.
Like he said he was going to do.
Like he said he would. Oh, I also forgot the story about when he punched a cop on the Harvard campus in Boston. There's a lot of things. This man has been allowed to get away with so much. It's just completely insane.
Right. There's an actual documented history of violence, not just the mental illness piece, which we know don't make people violent, but when there's a pattern of behavior, mentally ill or not, that's what we need to go with. Yeah.
Correct. So he then comes to LA with the express purpose of killing, kidnapping, and raping me. And so also by this time, my restraining order has been served because what ended up happening was pending in the system. And he went to the Silicon Valley office of a woman he went to high school with. And he went there and he announced himself and he said, I'm Superman. I'm here to rape, well, I don't want to say her name, this woman. And so the cops came and they detained him. They didn't arrest him. They just detained him. And while he was detained, they served my restraining order. So my restraining order has been there. And I should also include that by the time my case happened, I had 4,000 violations of my restraining order, as in 4,000 rape and death threats. And each one, because there's the law and there's enforcement of the law, right? So if law enforcement doesn't want to go and arrest the person, even if you're there going, I got another one, like, right? So I was getting very frustrated in my case at this point. There's a division of LAPD called TMU, which is a threat management unit, which is historically a very impressive unit. They were started with the help of Rhonda and everybody, post Rebecca Schaefer. And they're really this like elite unit, which for me is kind of complicated because celebrities and the people who normally would be in this elite unit, they have access to resources. They have access to security, right? It's the regular people like me that don't have. So, I mean, look, anything that helps people is great, but I'm just like, where's the regular stalking unit? Like in London, they call it, what is it, homicide prevention unit? I think that's what they call it. Yeah. So
great name too, by the way.
Right. It's amazing. So what ended up happening was my case is with TMU and the person who's now gone. So I want to be very clear about that. They have new people, right? So the issues that I have with the old person, he's no longer there. I was getting at this point, it was very clear. He also, he went to my eyelash place and he stalked me and scared all the girls, tried to kidnap my dog from a dog groomer. Like, this is getting really intense. I just started dating my husband. He started stalking my husband and it just was really, it was not a good time. And then he writes me and he goes, I know you go to LA Comic-Con. I'm going to go there and kidnap you. And he didn't know that I'm actually friends with the owners. I guess I do know everybody, Shiloh. You're right.
You do.
I know everyone. So he tells me he's going to kidnap me from LA Comic-Con. So I'm just like, well, if LAPD TMU isn't doing anything, I guess I'll just hire security, dress him up as Batman and Robin to not scare the children. And then when he comes to kidnap me, we'll just hold him down. And that's exactly what happened.
Best undercover gig ever, by the way.
Like everything about my story is so crazy. I'm like Cloud Star Chaser in the spacesuit.
I know. Batman and Robin got him.
So that's what happened was Batman and Robin held his ass down. We hand delivered him to LAPD, and I should actually backtrack it a little bit too. So I had been working with the Kardashians because he was stalking the Kardashians as well. So they have this ex-Mossad security team, and like nobody's scarier than the ex-Mossad. No. I thought for sure that's who was going to grab him, right?
Sure.
No, it was me. It was not their scary security team. Weird. So when we captured him and brought him into LAPD, that's when the Kardashians turned in their restraining orders, which we knew. And then out of nowhere, Gwyneth Paltrow served her restraining order. I did not know she was in the mix. It's still unclear to me exactly what transpired. I've seen some reports, some incident about him going to her kid's school. I don't know.
Oh, that was him, because I know.
Yes.
I didn't even put that ever together. I knew she had a horrific story of stalking. Okay, same guy.
He's not, unless she has another one, but he went to her kid's school.
Yeah.
So yeah. So then a year later, they put him on $1 million bail, which never happens, right? That's a whole other weird thing. And then a year later, when we were about to have my trial, I'm all ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
I walk in, and the stalking DA was just sort of like, well, we're going to take a plea, and, there we go. And so it was the kind of thing, and they're like, I was ready with my victim impact statement. I'm like, good to go. And they're just like, yeah, we don't think you should speak because you're going to get felony stalking max, which, you can't compel a judge to get more time. And I'm just like, okay. So what I didn't realize at the time was that there's a proposition called 57, which again is different than 47. People always confuse them. They're not the same. And 57 has a really kind of sketchy thing, in my opinion, which 57, it designated a variety of crimes as being nonviolent, which I get why people voted for it. If you say nonviolent, I'm thinking like cannabis, shoplifting, whatever. But what I did not know is that nonviolent in California includes rape of an unconscious person, forced sodomy, human trafficking, and stalking. And that's all immediate, reduced, cut in half sentencing. So yes, I got felony stalking max. I got the thing nobody gets. Like nobody gets,
right.
Like no one gets this far. No one gets, but so my 4-year sentence was immediately 2. And I'd already spent a year waiting for the trial, which, what is plea. So he was out a year later. I got married October of 2019. He was released December of 2019. Within 3 days, he was already reoffending and making YouTube videos for 3 days, right? So I've had to put him back in jail 5 times. He just got out again 2 weeks ago, and this is for the rest of my life.
Yeah. So when do you decide that I'm going to take this experience and move forward with what I can do? Because like you said, you were on the inside looking out. You weren't this investigator looking at stalking cases. You had lived it. Like you said, you learned how to trace IP addresses. What the, like,
yeah, I know. I'm pulling GPS trackers off cars. Oh, so I also wheel it back a little. So 2017, Vice did an article on me that went viral. And I'm not kidding when I say I really did go viral. Like I had offers for people trying to buy my life rights to make a movie. And it was calling me the Aaron Brockovich of stalking. So what happened at that point was everybody who wasn't being taken care of, which is really everybody, they're Googling stalking, right? And so then they would find me. And then I started, so I've personally done over 100 restraining orders for people. After 100, I've heard me say this before. I stopped. I'm like, it's not a frozen yogurt punch card. Like, I don't need, I've done 100. I know I've done 100. And I just started, really counseling people with understanding how to navigate law enforcement, the judicial system, risk minimization. So I sort of became what I needed to be, but for other people.
Right.
So that's an important part of my story too, is the activism and advocacy for other people. I was like, well, no one's helping me. At least I can use this for other people. But you asked a great question, Shiloh. And I just want to say that I support whatever anybody. Like there's some of us who are just like, this is so traumatic and horrible. I need to leave the state and get a fresh start. And you know what? You do that. There's other ones of us who are just like, this is insane. I need, so whatever anybody needs to do to feel safe is the right answer. For me, I was just angry. And honestly, I started realizing that I'm sitting on a mountain of privilege. It's like,
absolutely.
I'm sitting here going, if this is me, and like, I have all the things and this is still happening. So that's where I kind of turned the corner, was when there's a story I always tell, which is I was in restraining order court getting someone else a restraining order. And I saw a woman probably about my age holding like a little baby with 2 black eyes. And like, that's the face of this crime. And what ended up happening was the offender, I don't know if he was boyfriend, husband, or what, kept turning around and mad dogging or turning around, and until she ran out.
Ugh.
Right. And that's when I started doing the court companion, because I'm just like, fuck this. Like, this isn't right. And like, one of the things I've been advocating for is I want a green room. Like, they do that for trials, for like murder trials, but I want to see a green room where victims can be and they're like kept safe, you know, in a way so that they're not intimidated in the hallways. So that's like part of the stuff that I advocate
well,
for.
and this is what I'm talking about. Like, you have these ideas because you have this lived experience and you've seen people who are worse off than you in these situations and how they're living it. Hey, I have creative ideas all the time, but I do not have the follow through with everything. What I love about you is you follow through with this shit. You think it up and you're like, all right, what's the next step for this? You rally the people that you need to for it and you put it into motion. And even if you get some obstacles and walls thrown in your way, you're like, all right, the time will come and I'll find a way to get around that wall. But you guys, I mean, from filling out restraining orders for people to making gift bags, you know, for violent crime victims.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, when I say you do what you can do, you literally are putting together gift bags at your home and offering that up to literally anyone, you know.
And you were so nice, you donated to them. That's the thing, is like, I get so much support, and that's what I started realizing is that people, and obviously you're a special case because of the way I guess mean like just the regular, our peers, our friends, whatever, who maybe don't work in these spaces, right?
Right.
People care.
Absolutely.
People care. It's that there's a lack of leadership going, okay, you know what? Because everyone's like, oh, I liked a thing, I signed. They're like accidental slacktivists. They don't realize that right? Yeah. But once you actually have a call to action, you know, because that's how it started. Was I have friends who work in the beauty industry and they're always giving me free shit, and I was like, wait a second, how much free shit can I get to give to TV survivors?
Yes.
Like, that's how it all like started. And then I had my one friend who like is this beloved beauty editor, and she just put a thing on her Instagram, and suddenly I'm getting like Sephora and YSL, and I was like, wait a second. So that's what I just started rallying. It's the same thing as like when I used to do my art events or nightclubs.
Right.
It was like, hey, the party's over here. So now I'm just saying, hey, the help people party is
just a different party. Right.
It's a different party. Yeah.
So let's turn to your latest project and what you're doing. Tell us about Lenora Claire Consulting, what your vision was for it, and who you wanted to be a part of that.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked, and I'm so glad you said yes to being part of it. So I'm in this very bizarre position where I'm a crime survivor that works with the crime survivors, but I'm also an entertainment person. I've done casting, like all the crappy reality shows we all like to watch when we're just like trying to tune out life. Like I probably cast them, right? So I've been working in all these spaces. And so when I started doing these shows, I started seeing all these different, you know, as I mentioned before, the manipulation, the coercion. People don't realize, you know, there's this like thirst for true crime content, and some of it is ethical and purposeful. And like, personally, I love, people always ask me like what shows I love. I love Forensic Files. The reason I love Forensic Files, it's tasteful, but it's purposeful, because when I watch it, I know that whatever weird specialty, oh, you're a forensic odontologist, great. Like whatever this weird nerdy thing that you do, you cared enough to solve the crime, to give that person, you know, so that I get that show and I love that show, and that means a lot to me. And there's other ones where you're like, this is just trauma porn. What was this porn? This is really creepy and gross. So I started really clearly seeing that, right? And then the thing people don't understand is that on a lot of these shows, what they'll actually say to victims and the families is that, I know you don't want to do it, but because there's the legal and ethical, right? They're not the same thing. It's legally, we have the right to tell the story. So do you want to get ahead of it? Do you want to have your say? Or do you want some, you know, random YouTube university ding dong who thinks they know everything talking about you? And so the family's like, okay, I guess I'll talk about my murdered loved one. I really don't want to. And you don't realize how much manipulation and coercion goes into the show.
Yeah, just from the beginning, not even talking about what's happening on set. Right.
100%. And, you know, then there's things that I personally find in poor taste, like, you know, Night Stalker Doc. I really didn't like it. They had the graphic crime scene photos. These families are still alive. Like, what? This isn't some like Ouija photo from the 40s. Like, there's a really, this is not cool. It's not cool. So I started really thinking about that. And it's funny, like, I'm actually not an egomaniac. The reason it's called Lenora Claire Consulting was because I literally thought it was just going to be me.
Right.
I just thought it was a very small idea.
You're so funny.
Well, no, I really thought, so, but the thing is, looking back, everything I always do is always big, but like I forget this about myself, and I just thought it would be this small, intimate company. It would just be.
Right.
And so I started learning from my friends in the industry on the scripted side of things. There's a new role that's called an intimacy coordinator, and the intimacy coordinator kind of sprung up post Me Too. And it was like, let's have somebody on set who's an intermediary between the actors and production and make sure the love and sex scenes are all cool and everything's kosher and everyone's agreed upon. And I'm like, great. And so I was like, that's really nice. And I realized it's because there's regulatory entities like Screen Actors Guild who come in and step in. And I was like, so in theory, like a person portraying a crime victim has more respect and consideration on set than an actual crime survivor, because there's this role of someone specifically. So originally when I conceived of the company, I was like, I will be a liaison. Because I'm a survivor who works survivors, I could be on set. I'm also a producer. I can be that person in the middle who's just like, you know what, this, like, let's not do this. And kind of like bring, standards and practices to kind of do that. So that's where like the first role came in. Then I was like, no, consulting. And I was like, I want to consult on shows like you. I want to use my expertise, right? So that's when the consulting thing happened. And then I started getting really angry at, again, these YouTube University ding-dongs. They're people who don't know anything. They're not experts who they're giving time and space to as though they're authority on these shows. And I was like, no, this is crazy. And that's when I was like, I want people like Shiloh. I want people who really understand and should be on these shows. So that's when the experts came in. So then I started just talking to people, and people started hearing what I was doing. And then like all these high-profile crime survivors were like, I want in, because everyone was telling me the harm that everybody's had some gross story. So if you look it up, we've got Amanda Knox. Like, obviously she really went through everything with the media. We know what was done with her, right? So we've got her there. You've got like Cara Chamberlain, who's amazing, and Tara Newell from Dirty. Like there's like we all, and then you've got the forensic psychologist. We've got Alana Matthews, who's a progressive prosecutor. We've got the Transo Task Force genetic genealogist. I have Dominique, this is another thing that I learned. If it's this bad for most of us, the way that BIPOC stories are handled, there's a lot of microaggressions. Like, you don't really think about it, but oftentimes when you see these recreations, they're being cast by white people. And then they put a person of color that doesn't look anything like the person of color, which is literally saying all Black people look the same. Like, let's not do that. Right. Let's not do that. So we've got Dominique to do the cultural consulting. So we're kind of attacking all these different things. And I really just wanted, like, now, again, it's not just Lenora Claire, it's everybody, but I wanted it to be this very inclusive, really like a lot of different perspectives. And so now I'm at the stage where I'm meeting with networks and production companies and really trying to see how we can fit. And it's been really interesting. Lenny, who is she here? Is Lenny here?
I haven't seen Lenny on here. No.
Okay. So for those, I don't know if anyone's looking at the website, but Lenny, she was a CBS journalist before. I don't know if you guys know the story about the Trader Joe's hostage situation, that she was held hostage in a Trader Joe's, and it's just an awful tragedy. LAPD accidentally killed a Trader Joe's employee, like right there. Right. So, for her to come out, and her colleagues are there shoving a microphone in her. It's a very different, you can't, so Lenny.
She was on one side of the news and the media, and now here she is on the other side, and the worlds are merging.
Right. So Lenny has this amazing perspective about how we could be more trauma informed. Oh, I see all the it is Transgender Day of Remembrance. And actually we have the Transo Task Force, who I just love them so much. I'm so proud to have them included. But yeah, so like Lenny sort of is representational of everything involving the news media, right? So it's like we have people who cover news, people who cover docs, people who've had their life in scripted versions, and it's gone. So we kind of have all different perspective, and also a big range of crime. There's everything from, like, Lanisha is a gang interventionist, which is not, I know her because she's on the board with me, but like that's not my area at all. So
you have a cult survivor.
Totally, exactly, right.
So it's a badass psychologist now too.
I know, that's the other thing too. Like I am so proud, and like I literally love, like, if I had more time, I would go through the list and be like, Jason Piccolo, he's the shit. Like,
I know. You guys check out the website, because it's very, very impressive. The backgrounds of these individuals and their stories is just, And, you know, Lenny is such a special person, and I love how I've gotten to know her. And I went and visited her one day, and we were sitting down talking about her experience. And you also, you know, something else that you might touch on later is that also, you know, if this gets big enough, you would love to employ people who are trauma survivors, because it's very
Oh,
hard to find jobs
100%.
where people are just known by their trauma, right?
100%. Everything from my count on. No, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And when I was sitting there talking to Lenny, I thought, you know, it doesn't even cross my mind sometimes that I'm a survivor of gun violence. Yeah, it was on the job, but I've been shot at. It was the most traumatic thing that ever happened to me. And here I am, part of this. You know, it wasn't even something that I was thinking of initially when you asked me to be a part of this. And I thought, this has had me sit with kind of my stuff every once in a while too. And it's just the really neat relationships and experiences that have come out of this already with those of us in it. But I can't wait to see what it does, because just to recap for the audience, she's talking about being on set to be support for survivors. She's talking about consulting behind the scenes. And then the third prong is having experts to be able to be on camera if needed.
Yeah.
So you don't
They're all the
just
best
have,
practices.
you know, whomever on there.
Lots of best practice stuff. Like, for example, a certain forensic psychologist friend of ours, it does, so on American Idol, they do psych evaluations because they
Right.
want to make sure that if you go on the show and you're humiliated, you're not going to go harm yourself,
Yes.
right? So there was a situation where there was a woman who had pre-existing psych issues, a lot of anxiety and depression before she was put on the show. The producer, it did not go well. I was not on the set, but she spiraled and now she's homeless. Okay. So I also, like, why can't we just make sure that everybody's in a good place before we shove a camera in their face and make them relive their trauma? So I'm trying to call for major standards and practice changes as far as like, so it's a lot of things. Plus I also want to do content review. Like, I'm not here to censor anybody, but
Right.
you know, I want to get retainer agreements with networks and production companies where they would show us the content and we could be like, you know what, you could really use a trigger warning. Let's pull this photo, or like this language, we don't say that anymore, you know, like those kinds of things.
Yeah. Or because what it comes down to is they're making money on these victim stories, right? And these survivor
Right.
stories.
They don't pay us.
So to put a little bit of money into a pot that's going to help ease that, we've even talked about like, hey, how about a phone call to the person to say, this is getting ready to air, so they're not surprised and re-traumatized. You know, very simple little standards of practice that can start to be done in the industry would make all of the difference. So have you ever, can you tell me about a good experience you've had with the media personally, where you have, like, who does it right, or what has been a good one?
You know, weirdly, this is so weird because everyone's shocked when I say this, but I really like how I'm treated when I do Dr. Oz.
Okay.
And no one really, everyone's like, Dr. Oz, really? But like, like, for example, when I went on with Chris Mahandi, the producers read his book front to back. They were really respectful, and like, and I was actually on with Ellen Greenberg's family. They were there, in case, you know, and I just, her parents, like the story just gutted me, but they were so gentle and kind when, no, not Nancy Grace. Nancy Grace. No, she's the opposite. No, like it was just, Dr. Oz. The other thing, the reason why I say Dr. Oz was like because I've been on a few times, and I'm very clear when I do these shows now. I'm just like, let me tell you something. I've told my story 8 million times. You guys aren't paying me, so if you're going to have me go on, you're going to let me talk about legislation I want to have improved and safety tips, or I'm not doing it.
Awesome.
Otherwise, you're just getting me to just like trauma.
Yeah, there has to be a takeaway for the audience.
Right. And so Dr. Oz knows this about me, and they literally set up to do web extras with me just to accommodate me in that way. And that was awesome. So again, you wouldn't think them, but like they were, whereas the other show, which I won't say, because I'm also married to a defamation attorney, so I'm very careful with a lot of things that I say, but there's another show that people might confuse with Dr. Oz. It's not Dr. Oz,
right? Where
they were trying to, which I had a weird feeling about, and I didn't really know that I wanted to do it anyway. I don't know if I told you that. So the producers were asking me way too many, and I was like, hey, you know, I'm a producer too. You're going to bombard me, aren't you? You're asking me. And they're like, oh, and I was like, yeah, bye.
Yeah, never mind. Thanks.
Don't do that. Yeah.
Never great. Ugh.
Right. I mean, honestly, for me, it's like it's all different for all of us, right? So some of us want the catharsis of telling our story and being heard. If it's a missing persons case, you're doing that for awareness. You know, there's a lot of stuff. For me, it's really an opportunity to get stalking again out of where it was in like the 70s, where people just think it's a stranger in the bushes. And for me, it's a chance to bring the awareness. But I would say I've had more shows do me dirty than I've done it right.
Sure.
If I can be really
bet.
honest.
I bet. So what is next on the horizon? Like, what are things either you're working on with the DA's task force, or what are you trying to push in for next?
Lots of stuff. So so my partner Jess and I, she's my partner, we've created a stalking task force, which we're very proud of, and we've been having a lot of meetings with Schiff's office. Schiff is amazing. So we're just trying to get DOJ funding for that, and if we're able to do that, it'd be a multi-tier program where there'll be education, intervention. Like, what I'd really like to see is, you know, you're being stalked, you go to your local, because what we're going to start trying to do in LA first, and if it's successful, replicate it elsewhere. So what I'd like to see is, you know, you're being stalked, you go to your police department, a forensic psychologist would evaluate everything and then either red flag you or not and be like, yeah, they're at risk, or this will resolve itself. And then if you're red flagged, then a care team would be dispatched to you, where to your home, you'd have security walk through and be like, okay, we need a ring alarm here. Anyone can get through these bushes. And then you'd have someone help you with your tech, because a lot of these crimes have a tech component to it now.
Sure.
So they, you know, because basically I'm tired. I can't do this. I'm the one who's on the phone going, don't click any suspicious links. I'll get into your GPS. Let me wipe your, like, I am the stalking task force of Los Angeles.
Yes.
And I am tired. And my husband is like, you need to make some money, and I don't make any money when I do this. So I need to make this a real thing.
Absolutely.
Not this weird DIY version of me. Call Lenora, she'll help you. I can't do it anymore.
Right.
And so the other thing I'm trying to do within the DA's office, I mean, a lot of things, but I've been advocating. So in victim services, like when my case was there, so I help people get victims compensation. In California, for example, you can get $5,000 of mental health therapy, ring alarms. People don't know this because no cop, no judge, nobody tells you this, right? So we have this victim service reps, and there's, I think, 80 of them in the DA's office. And I realize now I did not know, because there was no dedicated stalking rep. So nobody came to me, and I didn't know. And, you know, when my case started, believe me, I spent so much, again, I'm losing my job back then because of my stalker. So paying for therapy, like, right, these are all a lot of things. So I'm really pushing to get a dedicated stalking rep in victim services.
Perfect.
And I'm working now with Spark, who's a DOJ funded stalking awareness group. So I'm trying to get teachings, have them come in and work with LAPD. So I'm like very focused on that. And then there's a million other things within the DA board, like I said, like the green room I'm trying to do.
Right.
So I'm just trying to do all the things. And I also have an idea for a mobile sexual assault, like a STAR unit, because there's only, we talked about this, there's only 4 places, and all LA County is huge, 4 places where a forensic nurse will do your exam. Most people go to their local ER, they get turned away, they leave. And so I'm like, why can't you just call 911 and a mobile unit comes to your house so they do your rape kit there?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So you have to have, for the audience, when there is a sexual assault, and I would do this when I had rape victims, you have to go to a hospital where then a SART nurse is either on staff there or they're on dispatch, and they'll meet you there when you're on the way. And they are specially trained to know how to do all of the chain of evidence exactly for victims and for perpetrators, if you happen to have them too. So what Lenora is talking about is, I can tell you cases that come to law enforcement and I'm taking them there, it took hours. And so if you could have a mobile unit dispatched to their home where they're going to feel more comfortable, it's going to be in and out. They can literally jump in the shower right afterwards because that's all they want to do. You know, that would just forget the time and the kind of running around that they would have to do, but the dignity piece, you know, sitting in a hospital waiting room isn't the funnest thing to do either, with, you know, a couple cops standing around that don't know what to say and it's super awkward and all of that. So gosh, what a great idea. That would be so incredible.
Yeah. So yeah, so and I see someone's talking about the bra and underwears. One of the other orgs that I work with a lot is called Grateful Garment, based out of San Francisco. And we just raised a bunch of money for them. I hosted a thing, and they give you back what was, if it bra, underwear, clothes, it's to replace your stuff after SA. Bed sheets, whatever, they take a lot of stuff for evidence.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Gosh, well, to have that 1 point person would be incredible. And, I think the thing is, when that gets started, to have a point person, they're going to be overworked. Like, this is going to turn into something else, where it's going to be a unit. It's going to be, because the need is there. Absolutely. So my goodness, that's so much and so much needed. I hope the response from the networks and the organizations you're talking to are more on the positive side than the like, do we want to change things right now side? But it'll get there.
I won't say who. One of the older networks was like, "Oh, we're doing a great job," and Lenny and I were like, "No, you're not." That was really wild. And then I met last week with one of the real big ones, like the biggest one you'd want to meet with right now.
Yes.
And they were very excited. I actually called, I made them laugh because, I'm a little too real sometimes. And I called the company the Bad Bitches of True Crime. And they were like, "Oh yeah, we can," because there's like that. I was like, "They're the Bad Bitches of True Crime. That's who they are." And they were really into it. So
good.
I hope they follow up the way they said they would.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we all know change is hard, right? And when you don't want to be called out as if you're doing something wrong, there's a very delicate way to market that, right? And I think you're very nuanced at being able to tell them in the way that they will hear it, instead of throwing up a wall and feeling defensive on their part of like, well, what do you mean we could do better? And you know what? Everyone is kind of going through that right now. Big entities where we're talking about law enforcement or the criminal justice system, everybody can do better right now. And we need to take a hard look at how those changes need to be made, even if it's meaning we have to apologize and say, yep, we have done things wrong or not up to standard in the past, but let's move forward.
Yeah, it's a really weird business model. Like, because I can't come in and be like, "Oh, fuck it up." Like, I'm really careful. I'm like, let's elevate the content. Let's elevate the experience, And the truth is, it's like anything else with enthusiastic consent. It's a better experience, right? Versus like pushing it on people. And I really said, if you make people feel comfortable and trust you, they're going to give you that much more. So if you're really there for this, like, that's the thing.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it is such a undertaking, and I, as sorry as I am for the experiences that you've had, I am so happy that this world has you in it to do these things now. So thank you for that. And thank you absolutely for spending some time with us this evening.
Also, like, weirdly, I know that everybody here is here because they follow you, but like, it's important on the survivor side to know that there's people like you that exist, because, a lot of us have all different kinds of experiences, and to know that there's somebody so intelligent and empathetic who gets all sides and really breaks it down is so powerful and important. And I love that you also that you do this as sort of like an easily accessible thing. That's the other thing too. Like,
sure,
I've told a lot of people, like someone like Nako, right? Like, I'll say, "Oh, I know this amazing whatever," but it's like, until you're having that connection, like, they're seeing it. So what you do is really, really valuable too. So thank you.
Yes, of course. That's, it's a harder spot to sit in for sure, to look at all the sides and to, I knew that you and I would have a connection when you were like, yeah, my dad was a mental health professional and he worked with law enforcement, for a period of his career. And I was like, this is so great. You have such a well-rounded view. Therefore, you can see the good and the bad of law enforcement or mental health or whatever. And that's okay.
Can I show you this real quick while we're here? I'll show you real quick.
For sure. Oh my gosh.
I'm always like,
look at her background.
People always ask me, it's really funny. They're like, what's your, like, how, why? So, okay. So my dad was a psychiatrist, urologist, sex therapist, but in New York, he was a police surgeon and he fully went through.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Like, my dad did a lot of forensics when I was growing up in the house, right?
Right.
So I grew up with this stuff like in the home. You know, my dad was hilarious. He's so past, but he was like a notorious speeder, and so anytime the cops would like pull him over, he'd be like, "Let me get out my ID." Oh,
Right.
and then the bat would fall out,
Oops.
and then they'd be like, "What?" Because I was in LA, and he's like, "Oh, in New York, I went through the academy. I did the right, whatever, police surgeon." So yeah, so it's really complicated for me, even though I had to unfortunately speak out against law enforcement. I come from a place of deep respect for law
Of
enforcement,
course.
and I'm not, and again, everybody's had different experiences. I'm friends with people who are law enforcement to straight up abolitionists, right? I'm friends
Right.
with everybody.
Right.
Okay. So like but for me, it's like, I just want people to do their job
Yes.
and do it with respect. And, so, but and just like anything, you have to call out the things that aren't working.
Right.
Right. So
Right. That's very cool. Thanks for showing me that. We get
yeah,
badges too. And I'm like, it's so weird that I have a badge that says psychologist on it,
awesome.
but also kind of a cool piece of history. And I love that you still have your dad's. So
Yeah.
how great. Well, thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate
Yeah,
it so
thank
much.
you. And thank you to I kept seeing stuff in the corner of my eye.
Oh, I
So
know. That's
thank
a,
you everybody
our
for
chat room is always very busy. So
I love
everyone
it.
loves your throne when you got up.
Oh,
So
this isn't even my good throne. This is the throne I do my makeup on. My good throne's outside.
oh my goodness, you're so funny. All right, Lenora, you have a great night. Thanks
Thanks, girl.
everyone for
Take
joining
care.
us.
Bye.
And Scott and I are going to do, I think we're just doing one Get Vocal in December. I want to say it's the 18th. And we're just going to do something fun. We're having the guys from Tennis Pod back on, and we're going to do something that's kind of pop culture yet Christmassy. We're working on it for you guys. So yeah, we'll catch you next time. Bye, everyone.